Hello, and welcome to the Mothers of All Crime. This is a podcast where we deep dive into mothers involved in infamous crimes and scandals. I'm Monica, and this is Crystal.
Welcome back to the Mothers of All Crime. How are you, Crystal?
I'm good. How are you, Monica?
Amazing. Happy to be here chatting with you.
Yes. So this one is going to be another little touch on a cult and part of one of the episodes on those docuseries we've been talking about. Specifically, the cult and extreme belief one, which was A&E investigative kind of deep dive into a bunch of different extreme beliefs. And then they had a round table at the end. So I think this one will be kind of fun to also work through as we do some of the other ones. And we're going to start off with the 12 tribes. Have you heard of anything about them yet?
So, I've heard a little bit about it and I'm definitely familiar with the show, but I'm not an expert for sure. So, I would love to hear all about the 12 tribes.
Yeah, so the 12 tribes are interesting. And it really, I think, depends on what aspect you kind of look at it. But before we dive into them, the one thing that I wanted to talk about to give you some context for me is I grew up in Massachusetts and there is a restaurant right down the street from where I grew up called The Common Ground. And it was on the same street as my high school. Super good. Turns out, ran by the 12 tribes. Had no idea my entire life until I was probably in college sometime. And I think it was one of those things that it just kind of shows how easy groups can just fade into the community and live amongst people without drawing attention. So the 12 tribes runs two different kind of restaurants. The yellow delis, which are all over the place. I think a lot of people know that, particularly where I was, but also in Tennessee. It's a very popular restaurant. And the second one is called the Common Ground. The aesthetic of them, if you are just going by, it's just a regular restaurant. It kind of looks very rusticy. And when you walk inside, it looks like a massive tree house, basically. And everything is wood carved. Their booths kind of look like you're sitting in like a tree hole. Like it's a really fun restaurant. And the food is, yeah, it's different too, right? Like, and particularly if you're traveling and you're going somewhere, you don't necessarily want to eat. Listen, I love a good Outback, a good Olive Garden, whatever the case is. But when you're going somewhere else or you're at college or high school, whatever, you want to go something that's a little different, right? Great way to pull people in.
Yeah, mhm. Definitely. That's very whimsical and fun.
Yeah, like a little fairy tale treehouse kind of vibe.
Exactly.
And then on top of that, the food's pretty good. I remember in high school, I would get like sandwiches, smoothies, sometimes a soup, depending on the weather, all super yummy. The people that work there are super friendly. It kind of felt like a mom and pop kind of restaurant. And you had the same faces every time you were there. And they would walk to and from the restaurant. Kids were homeschooled. Growing up, I didn't really think anything of it. They give off kind of like a hippies vibe, like the long, flowy, colorful skirts and the long hair, very like vegan, vegetarian persona, um, hemp, like, you know what I mean? Like just giving that vibe. And they were
Mhm.
super, super sweet though. So you would have conversations with them. And during certain times of year, I would order certain stuff and they'd like learn your name and have conversations with you, like, oh, how's your day going? What are you learning? Like just normal conversations. And I always thought they were really nice people. And it wasn't until I was
Yeah,
older
sounds like they're
that,
friendly.
Yeah. And then once I started learning and diving into the world of cults and beliefs and things like that, and I learned that 12 Tribes ran that restaurant, it kind of all started making sense. And how else are you going to get people to join something that is unfamiliar with them if you're not super friendly, super helpful, have
Mm,
somewhere that they want to go
mhm.
that's different? Um, and the Cults and Extreme Beliefs episode kind of follows the life of Sammy, and I'm gonna butcher her last name, so I apologize. But Brosario, we're just gonna say Sammy. But she was born and raised in the 12
Sammy.
tribes, and she even mentioned that part of the reason that they are so friendly in these restaurants is a recruiting technique. They're specifically looking at younger
Mhm.
people who are looking for something. Like the ones in Tennessee are near college campuses. So again, they're looking for people who have a void that they can do that love bomb kind of effect to draw you in. And then once you're in is when you, a couple months in, start learning all of the more extreme beliefs that they have. But yeah, this was a
That makes
special
sense.
special one for me.
Yeah, you got a personal connection.
Yeah. And so when you're watching this episode, you see clips of them doing events and stuff in public areas. And I was watching, I'm like, wow, I've been there. Yep. Should have known that. Like, it's kind of funny to watch. But when you go on their website, and their website is up, it's a beautifully set up. Again, great way to pull it in. They do have some places in Europe. They're mainly in the United States. A lot of it is in the Northeast. There are some scattered ones around everywhere else. But their main source of income is coming from the restaurants and farming. A lot of sustainability. A lot of farms are in colder areas. There's a couple overseas, but mainly, again, the Northeast region. And it's a lot of sustainability for themselves and growing. 12 Tribes as a whole has this belief that there are going to be 12 established communities, and there's going to be 12,000 per each tribe. And once they are fully established, that is when Jesus will then return with the tribes and usher in the second coming. And
Mm,
again, we see that consistency. This
okay.
is the first time, I will say, 12,000 in 12 different tribes. It's a different number than we normally see. Because when we've talked about some of these extreme groups in the past, have been Mormonism kind of as their sub base. So this is the first one I think we've talked about that has a different number that's going off of a Christianity base, just a different aspect, which I thought was kind of interesting.
So it's 12 groups of 12,000 people, right?
Yeah, strategically around the globe. So it's not like
Right.
we
So
could
that's
just have them all
144,000.
right, but that it's broken up in like very specific groups, which I thought was
Mm,
interesting. Because before it's always like we just
yeah.
need this number, right? Or like here's the
Mm,
numbered men in the Kingston group versus the total number with Mormonism. Like it's we're
gotcha.
still on the same number, but broken up. You can't like. I'd be curious if someone challenged us, like, well, what happens if there's 5,000, 15,000 here and 5,000 here? Does that mean the second coming won't happen because we're not distributed correctly? Like,
So do they want 12,000 in Massachusetts and 12,000 in Tennessee, or are those not far enough apart?
I don't know. I can't give you the answer to that, but it just says around
Hmm.
the world. So right now, from what I understand,
Gotcha.
they're in North America, South America, and Europe. Um, and we're gonna get into
Not
why
quite made it.
no, but we're gonna get into why I think they're hesitant in different areas in a little bit because of some of their practices of making it legal versus illegal. Um,
Okay.
so it's a little bit of a newer group, established in 1972 by Eugene Springs. He pretty much was establishing that the 12 tribes is going to be the reestablishment of God's kingdom on earth. Again, that same preach of
Hmm.
we are the chosen ones, we are the purest, we're going to usher the second coming. Same story, different preacher. um
Right.
they kind of go again with that modest dress, very simple hairstyles, but it's consistent, which is not something that I personally had picked up on. I just was like, hey, their hair's long, it's really pretty. Like, I didn't ever looked at the styles. And I think that's probably because it's not as what the common civilian would say as extreme. So when you think FLDS, you have the swoop, the hair, the like the look.
Right.
With the 12
Yeah.
tribes, they had a couple options, but they were all very just simple braids, hair straight down, maybe a bun if you're feeling frisky. Um, but it was all very simple things, right? And I didn't realize that that was a rule until Sammy kind of was talking about it in the episode on they were very strict about the modesty and your simplicity of the women specifically.
Gotcha.
But yep, communal living, homeschooling, they're really focused in on the Old Testament of Christianity to the extreme, doing their best to do very literal translations, very literal practices, which unfortunately root into them being very homophobic, very racist, um, and not something obviously they present until you're in it. Because I don't think anybody walks around screaming that at the top of the lungs, particularly when they're trying to recruit people. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think again their goal is to continue to grow, and similar to some of the other narrative we talked about with extreme groups, once they have that established 12 tribes and 12,000 per tribe, God will come in, destroy the earth, and only their members will survive. Because again, they are the selected people.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine, as a
Gotcha.
side note, if all of these religions were right and he like I'd be so interested of like, okay, everyone who's not religious is gone. Now fight it out like the next round of crusades. Like everyone's got the same amount of people. Off you go.
Like, if all of them are right, there'd just be chunks of 144,000 people, I guess. But that kind of already defeats it. So they can't all be right.
Right?
But I guess the people who are left are going to be the ones that are right. So
Yeah, it'll
no
be
one will even know
interesting.
about it.
But
It's
yeah, so
almost
they
like it's all kind of,
really, huh?
it's all just like a little silly because it's like we're gonna focus so much on this, but there's literally no way to even prove that we're gonna be right about this because it'll be the end of times.
Right. And then if I'm not good enough, I'm not going to make it anyway, even if we are right. So your
Exactly.
144,000 probably isn't actually 144,000. You're probably going to end up with like half that because nobody fits any of the standards that these groups present, like including their leaders, which I think we've seen consistently. The people making the rules
Oh, true.
never actually follow the rules. So even if they're right, you're going to get into the second coming and then your quote leader isn't even there.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly power corrupts people, and it's all becomes a ruse and manipulative. That's what it seems to
Mhm.
be anyway. Or
Yeah,
or just the people at the top just know it's not real, so they aren't really worried about following anything.
true. True. So kind of focusing on their practices, one thing that stuck out to me was this communal living to the extreme. Because when you say communal living to me, it's family compound or everyone helping everyone else. Like you grow the food, I'll make the clothes. Like, how do we build sustainability together? And one thing that's interesting about the 12 tribes is their children are also viewed as communal. So they're living
Mm.
together amongst everybody else, but the child can be trained, disciplined, and taught and loved, because I do think there is that balance to a degree, by everyone in the community. And everyone gets the same name, the same Hebrew name assigned to them. So it's really hard for outside persons to kind of investigate. But
Mm-hmm.
there was a infiltration by a journalist in Europe where they joined the 12 tribes and actually got video footage of corporal punishment on a child, a very young child. And this video is out there if anybody wants it. They do show a short clip of it in the episode. Um and that really is what brought the 12 tribes to light. I think they had been flying under the radar for a long time, doing some very damaging things, but no one knew. And then the people who were leaving shouting them from the rooftops, but also there's a very, very high number of suicides from people who leave groups like this. So, and it's hard when you're fighting alone, right? So, like, how much do you want to fight and not move on? Because I think a lot of times people look at some activists and question, like, just move on. Like, you get it, something happened, which I struggle with because I'm like, I want people to speak out. It's the only way that things are going to change. So, this video went viral and it is very hard to watch, and specifically because of how young the little child is. But that Sammy starts talking about that this was normal, this was the standard
Mm-hmm.
practice, and kids as young as 6 months old were be expected to sit through church silently for hours, and if they cried there was a physical response to that behavior. And again, zoning in on the part of the Bible, and I can't remember the verbiage of it, but the sword of the child. Like, if you love your child, you will strike them so they will learn. And really,
Yeah.
again, diving in on that.
I think it's spare the rod and spoil the child is like
Yes.
the phrase that you're trying to think of. Yeah. Which is like a thing that people say all the time to justify hitting their kids.
Yeah.
So
And
common excuse.
yeah. And not to make it okay for any age, but the idea of an infant who simply can't communicate otherwise
Mm.
crying. Because for all we know, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm whatever the case is, they can't communicate what's going on. And your response is the physical and corporal response is it just it's heartbreaking. It really is.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. That's so sad.
And I think there's another consistency that was mentioned is they have a child training manual, which basically explains
Mm.
how to beat your child and to what degree, how to pick out a switch, how to, like, at what point do you do it, what point do you not, how long, how hard, like the variations of physically striking them to segregating them and locking them in a room for extended periods of time to starvation to there's all these different aspects, and it's, quote, to make your child better, because the 12 tribes has the expectation that your children need to be perfect. The children are what is going to be represented to the second coming of Jesus, and due to that, the slightest imperfection is unacceptable. So, being a child, unacceptable.
Right. It seems to be a common theme with a lot of these extreme religions that kids have like extremely high expectations of them, and like the way to achieve these extremely high um results, I guess, is by corporal punishment. It just seems to be a common theme in a lot of the cults and extreme religions we've looked at.
Yeah, and another consistency is the shunning, and once someone leaves the 12
Mm-hmm.
tribes, they're dead to everybody. They're gone. It doesn't matter. You like there's no connection there. Or it has to be done in secrecy. And Sammy has been able to maintain some relationships, but she basically was like, after this interview and it goes live, she's like, I'm never going to talk. I think it was her sister. I'm never going to hear from them again because they're going
Mm-hmm.
to basically make her decide what you would like to do. And there is a correct answer in their eyes. So, um, but I think for this perspective is one thing I want to talk about is again, the age, there's no age restriction and any adult can punish. And in a lot of these videos, it is the women punishing the children and the women reinforcing these beliefs. And it's to a degree a generational, but the 70s were not that long. So we're not having multi-generational groups here. We have one, maybe two if you're super young. Um so it's interesting that they have this number of people, specifically women, reinforcing this to their children, because a lot of children, versus having it dealing each individual home.
Yeah, I do think that's kind of a creepy way to set up a community that anybody can punish the kids, and it just seems like a recipe for disaster and a lot of abuse.
Yeah, and I think we see consistency of like anyone can discipline in some other groups, but it's typically, hey, I did this to your child. Can I discipline your child in the future? Like permissions given of, hey, you're watching my kid, you have the right to handle them how you see fit. With the 12 tribes, there's no conversation. They just do it because it's understood you correct the child who's near you. And in Vermont, I believe it was, there was a raid and over 100 children got taken out of this communal home and brought into the state custody. However, because again, these children don't have documentation, these children all have the same name that they're given by, which is their Hebrew name. And so they don't have legal documentation of the names. So you can't get search warrants to have these kids evaluated, examined. There's going to be a lot of lack of evidence. And in this case, all the kids got returned because of that. Very similar to some of the stuff we've seen with the FLDS, where I think law enforcement gets overwhelmed of like, wow, I didn't realize there were going to be this many. And then also we can't identify them because it's home births. It's everyone's got the same name or all the Bible
Right.
names. So how do you address a problem that you know exists when you can't even get the legal documentation to do so?
Yeah, because it's basically like the kids aren't even, they don't even exist in society because they don't have birth certificates and they don't have their own identities really. So it makes everything more complicated to investigate.
Right.
Another common theme in these closed groups.
Mm-hmm. And I think it also is, we see the common theme of location, right? There's a home base, which for them is pretty much Vermont. Um, and then the Northeast in general. So we see that kind of with FLDS is really Utah-ish, but then the greater areas you have a sprinkle in about like Colorado and Texas and those general areas, but there's always the peak spot. And I think it got complicated when you have these children that are trying to leave and you have the group utilizing women to manipulate them into coming back. So in Sammy's case, she met with her sister because she was like, okay, like we can chat. She left. And then her sister brought her back and to her father, and she had to escape a second time. And again, it's that control of, we don't want you to leave, but also we don't want you to tell your story. We want to keep you as quiet as we possibly can.
Yeah, for sure. Of course they do. And that's why it's so brave to keep escaping.
Yeah. And I think one thing that sets them apart of the other ones really is their tactic of location. So I think sometimes people look at groups, and I may have said this before, but people don't join a cult. They join something that makes them feel good, a good cause, something to try to make a difference, something that's lacking in their lives. Nobody joins with the intent or belief. No, I shouldn't say no one. 90% of people that they're trying to do better. And they're typically very smart people. Sometimes we have people that aren't, but a lot of these people are very, very smart. And one thing that we saw with 12 Tribes is this German video reporter, after it went viral, they pulled all of their people out of that location and moved them to a different country where corporal punishment was legal. Because in certain parts of Europe, it is a crime. So rather than self-reflecting, we're just going to ban this country and then blame the country on, you don't understand.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they just don't want to have any consequences, which makes sense.
Well, that's why you see them so much right now. Is their big spot in Europe is in the Czech Republic, is because in that country, if there was a complaint to law enforcement for some kind of corporal abuse, it's technically still legal.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So I think one thing that I'd be curious on your thoughts are is we have some leaders that kind of go back and forth. So obviously we have the contradictory ones. But I think for this group, because of their strong belief in expansion and self proclaimed superiority, that their ratios are interesting because they still do have the traditional Christian marriage where you go through a courtship, you have a waiting period where the partner kind of expresses if they're interested or not. And then from there, you spend, quote, time together. They're deemed betrothed. If your community, the entire community, agrees with it. And then you get to hold hands. After that, you get
Wow.
to go into matrimony, you get married, and you get blessings till the end of time by God, and you are expected to bear children. Especially the sons will play that kind of evangelical superiority, yet the women are the ones generationally reinforcing those same behaviors, dealing with the children bearing, the raising, the discipline, because the men are working, they're doing construction, they're running the restaurants. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are, since it's a newer one, 1972. You're not even 60 yet. If you were born that year it was started, we might have two generations. Yet they seem to have just as strong of hold over their people as other groups, but they have a lot more of an appeal from an outside perspective. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on kind of the continued generations of that and how you think they'll kind of keep going.
Well, I guess the people who are second generation, it makes sense that they're pretty committed. I guess like at this point, if it started in the 70s, like people who were adults were joining it, we could be 2 generations deep into it, depending on how long the generations are.
True.
But I mean, and that is definitely one good way of getting new members, is to continue having kids and continue marrying outsiders and converting people and marrying them and having kids with them to keep the numbers going. That's a pretty common tactic for most cults. But when you mean, is that what you, I'm sorry, is that what you were asking? Or were you asking something different?
No,
I'm not sure
well,
if I maybe
yeah,
misunderstood.
but also more of like from it really seems to, at least from my perspective, fall on the women to continue to grow the group and maintain the
Hmm.
beliefs. Because you have the men obviously are disappointing people, but a lot of the documentation that I found, it's the women reinforcing it more than from a physical perspective. A lot of the things that
Hmm.
you see, obviously there are plenty of examples of fathers and brothers and men in general physically disciplining children in this group. There's no question. I don't want to misclarify that, but I
Sure.
think it's one of those, for me, you have women who are really the ones teaching, again, homeschooling, generational, showing
Mm.
this is the correct way versus men are leading and the women are teaching. And then for some reason, that was just the perspective that I got for this group, because they are presented as second class, the women, but also not nearly as significant, I feel, as other groups where your entire job is just to bear children and nothing else.
Well, they need them to homeschool. I mean, I feel like that also is pretty common in a lot of other religions, but if they have like the restaurants and stuff to run, they also need them to work. And so they need that. I mean, it only works if everybody's participating in it. So, and I think it's not an uncommon dynamic to have the moms in the religion staying home to homeschool. It seems to be across many groups what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah, no, it's just a different one. And I think, again, they're back under the radar right now. Kind of, they haven't had a scandal really since the 2013 kind of upburst. I know there was some later ones, mild ones with child abuse being investigated in 2019, an international one kind of looking into the group in 2020, but nothing from like national news. And I'm thinking that they are, again, just trying to deal with things localized and trying to avoid attention. So, for example, we had like a fire that broke out that brought law enforcement, obviously, because there's a fire. And then that caused starting questions of what's going on with everything else here. So, I think this is one group that is still kind of under the radar and is going to continue to be that way just because of their presenting. When you meet them, they're very warm, they're very willing to talk to you, they're very open, unlike some of the other more extreme groups that we talk about or we see, much more closed off to outsiders and much less or willing to accept outsiders. So I think this one will be kind of an interesting as more and more people leave and have the courage to speak up, similar to Sammy, and give opportunities and voices to those people. So I'm hoping for the best, but it does sound very difficult to leave, similar to a lot of the other groups. Not that that makes it different, but when you also have a lack of education, a lack of understanding, sometimes going out into the quote real world is intimidating. And you now not only have to deal with your lack of education, your lack of understanding, but you're also now countering, particularly in this day and age, all of the beliefs that you had where you're trained and raised to be homophobic. You're trained to believe in racism. You're trained that certain relationships aren't okay and to be fearful of those groups. So it makes it really hard, again, to reintegrate into the community. But yeah, I just wanted to have a quick chat about the 12 tribes. I thought they were a good one to kind of just touch on here and there. And then if any new interviews pop up, we can definitely talk about them. But I thought since I just remember growing up eating their sandwiches, it would be kind of fun to talk about the comparison. Do you have any thoughts before we wrap this one up?
I mean, I do kind of want to try the sandwiches.
Not gonna lie, they're very good cooks. Like, not that I want to
Yeah.
promote people to go to any of their restaurants because it does go to this group. Their food is fantastic. And their restaurants are really cool.
Yeah.
And that again, this is the draw in.
Yeah. I know. They may have been able to get me, honestly. Sounds pretty good.
Just sandwiches and
I think
pie and some soup on a
I
cold
think
day. I get it.
I mean, there's nothing better than a good sandwich. So that would win me over for sure. And I mostly just think it's really impressive when people do leave these kind of groups and then are willing to speak about their experiences. For me, it's very interesting, but I'm sure for them, it comes at a great sacrifice. And there's a lot of really scary consequences that could happen for speaking out after leaving a group that your entire family and your whole social network is in. So I appreciate it, and I think it shows a lot of bravery.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, until next time, I think we have a bunch of other groups coming up. We have a bunch of individuals coming up. So I'm excited for the next one.
Me too. We'll check back next week.
Till next time.